Hi everyone, Jill here and welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. Today we are talking all about, drumroll please, growing Lisianthus. Now, if you have stumbled across my video, it is probably because you have heard so many things really discouraging you from growing Lisianthus. And I'll be honest, as a newbie flower farmer, I have heard so many controversial things about Lisianthus is a must-grow flower. Lisianthus is a flower I would never waste my time on. So I want to share with you guys from start to finish what it looks like me growing Lisianthus as a complete newbie, knowing nothing about it, to hopefully help you guys who are maybe considering growing Lisianthus, especially those of you who are growing in the south. So I live in central Arkansas, zone 7B. So we decided we were going to grow these this year as an experiment to see and really be able to answer that question ourselves. Is a Lisianthus a must grow on our farm, or is this going to be a crop toss that we just don't worry about dealing with? So I'm going to share with you guys everything from trellising, planting, and what I have learned so far. So you might have noticed that these plugs are absolutely stunning. I mean, check them out. It is March 17th when I'm shooting this video. These plugs look great. You know why? Because I didn't start from seed. So in all of my research, I have found that Lisianthus take forever to pop up, that they leave with a lot of disappointment and discouragement and a lot of time, energy, and money wasted. And so I knew if I was going to grow Lisianthus on our farm as a profitable cut flower, I was going to buy plugs because I needed to set myself up for success. And from my research, that's what a lot of the farmers were doing. So I bought my plugs from Farmer Bailey. I bought them months ago. You put in the date that you want them shipped. So I'm growing 4 different varieties of 128. So this is a 128 cell tray. They ship straight to my front door and they look beautiful. So one, that would be my first little tip. Maybe don't stress yourself out. Maybe skip that discouragement from trying to grow from seed and just invest in growing from plugs, because I have found that everything I researched, people who grew from plugs had a lot of great success. So that was the first thing I opted to do. Buy plugs from someone else. And then again, I opted to spend time while my little seedlings are being grown out on another farm to do my research. Figure out what type of soil do Lisianthus like, what type of irrigation do they like, when do they want to be planted, are there any other special tips or tricks I need to know? And I come to find out that there were. One, you actually need to plant out Lisianthus when they are at this small little seedling size. So while you might think about having a nice mature transplant to go in the ground, with Lisianthus, the smaller they are, the better that they do. And you really want to plant them out when it is still cool. So I mentioned we live in Arkansas here, and we've already had several 70, 80 degrees days, which is pretty common for us. We have a pretty warm spring. And so this week it is supposed to be overcast. We are supposed to have cooler temperatures coming in. It's actually at night going to dip back down to 32 degrees. Partially cloudy all a week. So I knew this was my window because everything I read and researched stated when you plant Lisianthus out, you want to give them a period as a young seedling to have cool temperatures and let them adjust before you start to have an increase in temperatures. So this is very common with a lot of other flowers as well. You want to avoid transplant shock, and how you do that with Lisianthus is planting them when they're cooler. So even though it's going to dip down to 32 degrees, we're not going to cover these at all. They're going to do just fine because they actually are like kind of a cool weather flower, which is why I find people in the south have a little bit harder time growing them. And you'll notice a lot of northern growers having a lot of success with these. So I'm going to show you guys this cute little Lisianthus here. You can see it's a small little seedling, but it's got really good root systems. But you've got 4 sets of leaves here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So technically 2 sets, 4 leaves. This is the stage that they need to go plant it out. So most of mine are at this stage right now, and they look great. And again, I'm trying to take advantage of this window of cool weather. So I'm going to share with you guys real quick the 4 varieties that I bought. And before we dive into planting all of this and the spacing and the rooting hormone, which is really, really important for the success, so I hear, first let's walk through trellising. So we are growing ours inside our Bootstrap Farmer tunnel. We have set up trellising with rebar and Hortonova flower netting. So I'm going to do a time lapse, share with you guys how quick and easy this process was, and talk through what this looked like. So here we are placing the netting for our trellising. So we have got 3-foot beds. We are just using rebar because it's what we have on hand and it's easier to install than T-posts. But you could certainly use T-posts. You are going to need some sort of structure. So our flower netting is 6 feet long. So we are going to unroll, as you see here, and put the first layer on there, take some scissors, snip it off, cut it in half, and go ahead and place our second layer. While we will not need that second layer for a while, we're going to go ahead and leave it at the top of this rebar, and we'll pull it down when it gets ready. So you can see here, this is a pretty easy process. We do not have the rebar or T-post, if you're using it, set to a certain spacing. However, we do have it set per variety. So we've put our rebar to where we can plant a full variety of 128 cells and use that rebar as a good marker to start our next variety. Instead of losing plant tags, we just found that this was a really easy method for us, using about 12 rebar pieces. So you can see here we've secured the rebar around the netting. I pulled the netting to the bottom to act as our grid for spacing. Another important thing, especially if you're wanting to grow Lisianthus for profit or any flowers for profit, is the more organized you are, the better it's going to be on the long run. So make sure you have got all your labels, however you're going to label these. We actually are planting these to where each tray will be planted in between rebars, which is really nice. That's going to act as kind of a divider for us and going to make it really easy for us when we come in and we take notes. So we have set up our rebar and our structure here with our netting to where it is grid. So we can plant in each of these grids the different varieties of Lisianthus that we have. So I think that's just going to help us be more efficient in the long run and throughout the season as we're taking notes. So now that we have our trellising up, we have labeled everything, now we are getting ready to plant. And so one, I like to put my netting up before I plant. We went ahead and did the 2 just because we were already putting it up. We will not need the second layer of netting for quite some time. But the great thing about this netting is that I use this as my planting grid. So instead of having to have my hori out here or some sort of dibbler measuring, I'm using these squares as my spacing. So I'm going to be planting these 4 inches apart and 5 across. Now I could technically get 6 across. You can plant at 3-inch spacing. Because we are hotter here in Arkansas, I chose to give a little bit more spacing in hopes that I don't deal with disease. And so I'm just going to be planting, these are 4-inch squares, so I'm just going to be planting my Lisianthus directly in the middle of these, which is going to act as my grid and my spacing, which is really, really nice. So you might notice I have a bucket here. What is this bucket for? This bucket is full of root shield. Now, this is something I did quite a bit of research on. Root shield is essentially something you're going to dunk your seedlings in before planting to protect them against wilt. So Lisianthus apparently is really prone to this wilt right here, and a way that you can combat against that is by dipping it in this solution before you plant it. But essentially it will look like your Lisianthus is just not hydrated enough, but that's not the case. It's this wilt. I'll actually put it in a picture here so you can see what it looks like. Now this root shield is not cheap. I'll just be real honest with you. So I went back and forth for quite a while. Is it really necessary? But then I thought, you know what? I'm a newbie. This is the first time I've ever grown Lisianthus. I've invested a couple $100 buying these plugs. Why not go ahead and set myself up for success and do all the things? So I decided to use this. We can also use this rooting hormone for some of the other flowers that we're going to be transplanting. So it was worth the investment to me. And again, just based off of research, many other farmers also said it was worth the investment for them too. So we have mixed up the solution here. It's just water in the solution, and you are wanting to dip your seedlings for 30 seconds. So I made sure that my seedlings were not already saturated. I let them dry out quite a bit because I knew I would immediately be dunking them in this solution before we went to plant. So we're just gonna dip. Again, you want to make sure that not all of that soil is falling off. So I'm not even really counting here. But now we have a nice moist seedling, pulling back the soil. And there we have it. Our first Lisianthus is in the ground. So let's get busy. Alright friends, thanks for hanging out with me as we trellised and planted Lisianthus. Again, I am hoping to share with you guys a beginner's perspective to growing Lisianthus. I will of course be doing follow-up videos, whether this was a success or a failure, sharing with you what I learned in hopes to help you, especially southern growers, with growing Lisianthus, if it's even possible. So wish me luck, but if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I will attach a link for the Farmer Bailey plugs, although I think it might be a little late to actually order them, but I guess that's dependent on where you live. So you can find all of the links down in the description. But thanks for hanging out. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll talk to y'all soon.